So the history of the Rabidts universe. I posted earlier a little bit about this. There's a lot of material that goes when I'm developing a story, even something as ridiculous as this. There's a lot of material that goes into that the average viewer of my work would never see, and that's true whether it's a comic book or the children's book I did or any concept. And I've developed tons and tons of concepts for cartoons and stuff over the years with lots of supplemental material, and so Rabbids was no different. And so I thought I'd make a video going through some of this. You'll have to bear with me because a lot of it, it's not like I haven't memorized. That's why I write so much of it down, is because I have a hard time remembering a lot of where I'm at on things and that sort of thing. So you have to bear with me. I'm going to recite some of it from memory and some of it from reading through and paraphrasing because there's a lot of material. So we're going to go through the history of the Rabbids universe. Okay, so where do they come from? I went back clear to the creation of the universe with these. So, when you're thinking of an origin, where did they come from? And really, they aren't that old of a species, and they were created artificially. So, anyway, you'll see all that. So we'll go through that. So here it goes. So originally, the creation of the universe happens, right? There's a big bang, and that kind of started the whole of the universe. And there's just darkness at first, and then this energy gathers in one place and manifests itself as a tree of life. There's a giant tree out in the nothingness that starts to grow, and it produces fruits, and eventually those the fruits rather have seeds in them, and there's like all this energy that comes around the fruits and the seeds, and those seeds develop and grow into what are the archangels. The archangels are the first creatures in the universe. They are direct descendants of the tree of life. They are born from it. And it takes them a very long time, millennia, to recognize, become sentient and recognize their own existence. And so once this happens, they start to learn, because the tree, one of the many gifts it gives them, is knowledge and power. And they're still attached to it at this point. They're attached to its roots. They're living from it. It's it's feeding them, but also it's giving them knowledge. It's giving them power. And so time goes on. Thousands of years are going by. This is the case. The tree could not give them wisdom, though, because wisdom comes with experience. Knowledge does not require discipline. Power does not require discipline. Wisdom requires discipline. So they don't have discipline. They don't understand the context of anything outside of just the knowledge they have. They have no experience. They didn't know anything but peace for these millions of years. They knew nothing but a peaceful existence, and they started to become restless, and they eventually began to experience jealousy. They were jealous of this tree. The tree had all this power and wisdom, and they believe that they can do better. So they start plotting collectively to steal the power from the tree. And this belief became known as the Mega Superior. So it's a belief that they collectively hold more power and knowledge and wisdom than the tree can impart on them. So if they simply put their forces together, they can take the power away from the tree and have it for themselves, namely the power to create life, because the tree is the only thing in the universe that can create life. And so they do this. They execute their plan, and the plan fails. The problem is this tree starts to die. And so as the tree's, dying, it produces seeds. And these seeds become sacred because these seeds are formed from the mother as she dies. The tree is the mother. And so the seeds are being formed as she dies, and immediately infighting begins over these seeds, because these seeds are the only things that can generate life. One of the powers that was only the trees that the archangels could not have for themselves was the ability to create life. So these seeds are all that's left in terms of the power to create life in the universe. So the archangels start infighting over them. They start trying to get them and keep them for themselves because they want to create species, they want to create life, they want to create worlds in their image. That's what they want to do. They want to have the power the tree had. So that's what they start doing. So they start fighting, and so they divide them amongst themselves, through this infighting. Because these seeds are all divided, though, because the archangels are divided, the wholeness of the power that the tree had will never exist again. It's gone. Tree dies. Its power is basically what's left of it is divided into these seeds. The seeds are divided among the archangels. The archangels are, you know, the power isn't unified, is what I'm saying. So it will never be what it was. After the infighting ends, the tree's gone. They realize the gravity of what they've done. They get back together and they start, instead of fighting over them, kind of dividing them amongst themselves, because they realize that there's no point in the fighting, and there's enough to kind of go around. So they start handing them out. But they realize that because they're no longer attached to their mother, their archangels are no longer attached to the tree, and the tree has died, that was the source of their power and knowledge, that their own powers would begin to fade over time and they would become mortal. So the power of immortality was tied with the tree too. So the archangels realize that over time they're going to lose that. They're going to become mortal. So the only way to kind of cement their existence in the universe is to create worlds in their image. That's the only way to do that. So the archangel Uriel is one of the powerful seven. Gifted Jophiel. So gifted Jophiel 7 seeds to go forth into the universe where she could reign and create life. So the archangel Jophiel found a barren galaxy at the outer edge of the Milky Way. It would be called joephi. She set about seeding that world in the name of the Magus Superior, which was basically their dead religion. They believed that collectively they could have all this power that they couldn't. So she would plant these seeds on a warm rock 90 million miles from the sun of joephi, and the seeds did not grow. She stayed there for 1,000 years only to find that the seeds wouldn't take root, and her line would die in the cold abyss of space as a result of the culling of the tree of life. She began to weep, and as she wept, her tears fell to the ground, and the tears of the archangel joephi would water the seeds that would sprout the aster tree. This sprouting, however, along with the sprouts of the other 6 trees that Jophiel would plant on joephi, put out a burst of creation energy into the dark corners of the universe that drew greater demons. But anyway, so this burst of creative energy that spouted life went out into the universe, and it attracted a greater demon, Leviathan, and his retinue of lesser ghouls to the tree's signature. Leviathan wanted to devour the sapling tree. In doing so, would steal that power. To protect this, Jophiel used her remaining power to focus the power from the star of joephi to push back the beast. It worked on lesser demons, but the power of Leviathan was even greater than that. Jophiel would have to make the greatest sacrifice a mother could make for her children. And so she used the energy from the star with herself and sacrificed herself to protect the life she had created in this world. And now that it was safe, the aster tree, the tree of aster tree, would grow and flourish over 1,000,000 years using the energy from the star of joephi to generate life. As it created life, giving oxygen, its leaves would grow and fall and create soil. And so through this process, over thousands and thousands of years, it created fertile soil. It created the fungi and microbes that needed to survive. Over time, the tree would start to root, and it would form pods. These pods would open into a variety of life. The tree itself would over time produce 1,000 different kinds of fruit. Each seedling is a different organism, and the world would be named Astercroft. The first species that come off of this tree are the origin species. And so it produces many, many what are called proto species, but most of those don't survive into the future. A few that do are the proto hares, which eventually evolve into a more advanced race, and the proto lambs, which eventually evolve into a more advanced race. Two major intelligent species by the time we get through, like, you know, creation history. You have two. And they're both through the proto hare line, so they're both relative to what are the rabbits. You have the Pitarians, which are your common race. They're the most common on the planet. They would be the closest to like humans in terms of their intelligence and ability. And then you have the Hossen hares. The Hossen hares are like an advanced race. Um, they have the advantage of having a great intelligence, and they also have like almost supernatural powers, but they also do not breed very quickly, and so there aren't very many of them, and the ones that are there, it's not like they're making more of them. So way back in their history, there were a series of events that essentially led to the Hossen hares becoming the leaders. So, and it's not a situation where there's subjugation at this point. There certainly is a hierarchy. I think of it like an aristocracy almost. So there is a hierarchy in terms of, you know, political power and all that. And the hierarchy is the Hossen hares are at top and the Pitarians are at the bottom. Well, over time, there's some issues there. The Hossen hares eventually become kind of politically divided. Some of them start to think that where they can't breed that quickly, the best solution to that is to breed with the Pitarians because they can interbreed and produce offspring. That imparts some abilities onto them, but they're still not pureblood Hossen hares, which is what the other faction believes. The other faction believes that that should not happen. The only ones that should be allowed to lead are the Hossen hares. The Praetorians are subjects. It's not a slave situation, but also there is definitely a distinction. And their argument is that the archangel joephi blessed them with the power they have. So they believe that their power is, you know, is God gifted almost. So time goes on, and eventually there is a Pitarian that is born that is of both, right? So it's a mixed breed. And so there's a kind of a war that this one starts because they believe that it shouldn't just be pure blood leading, it should be mixed blood, should be leading too. And so there's this big kind of blood feud that starts. And eventually, what happens though is that's interrupted. There's a, you know, another species that comes in, and the Kringelians come in, and so they come in and decide that they're going to take life, their tree of joephi, right, the seed of the tree of life. It's not the tree of life, and so this is the source of their civilization, sort of. So there's a war that's fought, and eventually the Hossen hares and the Pitarians realize they're going to lose this war. So the Hossen hares make the decision to destroy the tree of life. So they decide to kill it. And just so the enemy can't get it because they don't want them to get the power. So they do that, but they also have this giant spaceship that they've built with ancient magic and all this stuff. And so they load on as many of both species as they can. And a group called the Council, which is the Hossen hare governing crew, they get on there. And the ship takes off. Their world's destroyed. It's gone. Astercroft blows up. So they travel through the universe looking for another hospitable planet. And they find Earth. Eventually, they make it to Earth and crash land. And when they crash land, the explosion from all that creates like a portal that's another dimension, but it's based in Earth, right? So over time, they start to come out of, there's portals that are open that they can come out of this dimension into Earth. And they start to interact with humans, and the first group that they interact with is actually the archdiocese. They start to try to build an alliance, and so that works out. So they're kind of kept a secret. That's the original plan, and that's how they became part of rabbits became part of Easter. Even though these creatures are not really related to rabbits at all, they resemble rabbits, and so they become part of the Easter tradition. So the infighting that had began between the Hassenhares and the Puterians starts to pick back up again. Well, the problem is the pureblood Hassenhares had decided that they're the ones that created this relationship with the archdiocese. So the only thing that humans know is what they're hearing from them, and they're telling them that basically these people that want their freedom, their equality or whatever, are the bad guys. So naturally the humans side with them, and so they kind of form an alliance, and that creates some problems with the Puterians, who then start to break out of the portals and decide that they're going to go and fight against the humans, the church, and the Hassenhares. So these Hassenhares look back at their own genome, and they decide that there's not very many of the purebloods. So what they're going to have to do is develop some sort of way to fight them. There's no way humans are going to suffice for that because they're just not equal to the task. So they go back and they create a species that's based off of an earlier species of their own genome called Karasov hares, right? So that was right after the proto hares were created. It was an earlier species. But anyway, the basis of these creatures, clear up to the Hassenhares, hares, is their makeup and all that's closely related to a fungus over a human or a mammal. Just because they look like something doesn't mean they are something, right? So anyway, they start messing with these genetics and they create these things, and they basically are what are the rabbits in the movie, and they think they can control them, but they can't. So they break loose and immediately wipe out the Hassenhare Council, the ones that created them, and they also start wiping out the Puterians. So they are wiping out even the opposing side and their own side, and this starts to break out of these portals, and that's when the church orders the portals closed. So basically, they wipe their own species, like all of them, out. They're all gone. And the only thing that's left is this plague they've created, which are these rabbits. And so the church goes on protecting these portals and has to close them with magic. So that's where we are in the movie as we come up, and that's where the origin of the portals is, and these species and all this are. That's it. I apologize for how long this went on and how kind of whatever, but I was kind of half reading it and also trying to do from memory so I didn't have to read all of it. So that's kind of the history from the creation to today of the rabbits. So really they are a genetic mutation created by a superior race that believed in eugenics. And so they kind of decided to try to make a super weapon out of themselves, and the result was the eradication of their own kind, and also this plague that our characters have to deal with in the Rabidts movie. So that's the background on the rabbits. I hope you enjoyed that. If you've waited this long, if you've listened through this much of the video to get to this point, you probably deserve a medal. None of that in any way is necessary for somebody watching the movie to know or enjoy in the film, but it's the sort of thing we do. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much. That's it.